Let's look at 5 types of panic response. These are the types of response when things happen to you. When things happen to you that scare you or frighten you, here's the 5 levels of response. And we're going to be most interested in the last 3, so I'll move through the first 2 quickly. Normal stress response is the first one. Normal stress response is what occurs before you get PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It doesn't always lead up to the full-blown disorder. You're scared. A person has a horrible experience, but recovers relatively quickly. Events like accidents, injuries, illnesses, surgeries, etc. Any source of unreasonable amount of tension and stress can lead to this response. Typically, this can be managed easily with supportive friends, just speaking it over with the spouse, being understood. Occasionally people need a little therapy. Occasionally they might need some group therapy. But generally speaking, this is the normal stuff. We all go through difficult times in lives, and we have our struggles, and we have our issues, and we have painful moments where we feel enormously stressed and hurt. That's normal. That's part of life. And we get over that with support and kindness and understanding, and that's not something that haunts you for the rest of your life. On the contrary, 3 days later, that's the general rule of the thumb. 3 days later, you don't actually remember how scary that was, whatever that event happened 3 days ago. That's normal stress response. Now let's get to the next level, acute stress disorder. So again, it's not the same as PTSD. The reaction is strong, but not severe. It can be triggered in people who've been exposed to what is or what feels like a life-threatening event. Natural disasters, loss of loved ones, loss of a job, or risk of death. If left untreated, acute stress disorder could develop into PTSD. It could develop into it, but not necessarily. And usually a little bit of therapy, a little bit of counseling, again, takes people out of it. A couple of sessions, talk it through, and you're fine. In other words, the point here is that not all like difficult, panicky, frightening, horrible events automatically cause PTSD and will throw our kids off the derech. This is not true. There's levels on which the problem impacts the person, and there's the norms of life. And what the job is to differentiate between those which, yes, it is normal and regular and common that we should be able to 3 days later get over it, or talk it over with someone, a counselor, with a therapist, a rebbe, a mentor, a mashgiach, a mashpia, someone. You talk it over. You need a little bit of help. But again, a week, 2, 3 later, it's gone. It doesn't reoccur. That's the difference. It doesn't make a roshim on the person where it can come back and haunt you and starts controlling your life. These are normal reactions to life, and it's crucial that we learn how to differentiate between the 2 types of stress reactions. Each are scary, but we need to know which is which. Okay, now let's get to our material. Uncomplicated PTSD. So uncomplicated, or this is really what they refer to as single event PTSD, is usually linked to one major frightening event. That's what we discussed at the beginning. A near life-threatening event. Someone felt that there was something so horrific, so frightening, one event that happened to them, that they're terrified for their lives, and it can throw them into a complete panic mode where they start obsessing and thinking over and can't forget and can't get it out of their system. That's the easiest form of PTSD to treat, and it's almost not negea to our sugya either. At least it defines itself as PTSD. I want to put it on the map, but again, it's rarely our sugya. The symptoms of uncomplicated PTSD include, which is similar to what we're going to talk about, avoidance of trauma reminders, nightmares, flashbacks to the event, irritability, mood changes, and changes in relationships. This is where people can get re-traumatized by, if it was I'll give you a marshal, unfortunately, a single event of molestation, of sexual abuse, and it occurs on a specific street where someone touches a child inappropriately, and it's in a certain location, the avoidance of that location, the inability to walk down that street, the sense of fear of anything that even looks like that street, that's it relates to the event, and it terrifies a person where there's internally a mechanism to protect a human being from being traumatized again. We're going to come to what that internal mechanism is. So internally, the brain informs the person that something like that is about to happen, could happen again. And so the person gets the terror response, the fearful response. That's PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And of course they're terrified. The classic disorder was more or less invented after the Vietnam War, when they discovered that Vietnam vets were coming back traumatized from the sounds and the events of the war, and would be on a regular high street, walking down the street, and hear a car backfire or a motorbike backfire, you know, the noise, the loud noise of a car backfiring, and leap on the floor or in certain cases kill people, react as if they're in the jungle about to be killed and start killing people. This is PTSD. Uncomplicated PTSD, that means single event PTSD, can be treated through therapy, medication, or a combination of both. And in this case, EMDR is almost always the best possible treatment. EMDR almost always will focus on that specific event and can change the internal mechanism and help a person feel free. Still not our sugya. I want to be very clear. I'm trying to build up towards, by isolating what is not our sugya, these are not our sugyas. Almost any of these types of panic and fear is not what our children are going through. Complex PTSD, this is our sugya. This is the sugya that we have to understand because it's extraordinary and it's so overwhelming, and the problem is it frequently doesn't relate to any single event. In fact, if you would look at any single event of what happened, the kids generally, someone will say, that's what bothered you, that hurt you. But it's not about an event anymore. Because in complex PTSD, it's the opposite of uncomplicated PTSD, as it's caused by multiple traumatic events, not just one. Each little event, cumulatively, when you build up more and more and more and more of those events, over time causes that traumatic reaction. Complex PTSD is common in abuse and domestic violence cases. And while they share the same symptoms, treatment of complex PTSD is more intense than uncomplicated PTSD, which is why we have the problems. This is why we have so much difficulties reaching and understanding our children and helping them with it, because there's no single event to go and treat. The experiences they've had, cumulative, take, just again, Le Marshall. Take a child, I'm sure any of us here could have a child who has a serious learning disability. And they're in an environment, a school system, where success, hatzlacha in life, is defined by your academic success. And when you don't succeed academically, and when you go into class every day and you feel like a total loser, you feel stupid every day, day after day after day, and kal v'chomer if you get called on to read something, even when it's a well-meaning teacher or rebbe who wants to encourage the child and push the child and get them to read and give them the chizuk, you can read, but they can't. Or they can't translate, and they can't do it. Day after day, year after year, being in a class, feeling like a total, utter loser, cumulatively, it's like every step into that class and every time I tried to learn, when you put all that together, is actually traumatic for that child. That means they can actually dissociate, they can disconnect, they can look at the whole thing as the most frightening, horrible experience, as one that affirms for them that you're a loser. Imagine the Gehinnom of going into school every day feeling like that. And there's no one event that ever happened you could say that was a traumatic event. And yet every day the sinking feeling of walking into Gehinnom knowing I can't do this. Complex trauma, and just so we can understand, is extraordinarily difficult to treat. It is so not like any other form of trauma, or simple, uncomplicated trauma. It's not like that at all. And by the time, usually, the child has grown up, become older, and started struggling, they are deeply, deeply affected by a myriad of different hurtful experiences that have happened. Again, each one on its own, which was not a life-threatening or near life-threatening experience. So they would never get the PTSD diagnosis, and it's almost impossible to treat it because there's no one event you're going to be able to handle with one event and go and do something about it. Most of our children are suffering with complex PTSD. Most of them have, complex by the way doesn't mean like difficult. It's not like the complexity of it. Complex simply means lots of different types of frightening and hurtful and painful experiences that affirmed that I'm a loser, that I'm hopeless, that I'm never going to succeed. The affirmation that somehow I'm worthless. And that's an insidious feeling. The look on a parent's face when a child can't do homework properly. Just that look on your face that affirms in the early years when you're trying to, be mechazik and push your kid to learn, and meanwhile all they see is disappointment, or disgust, or frustration that it should be taking 10, 15 minutes to do this homework, and this kid can't do it. It takes half an hour or an hour, and he's wasting my time. How many people have said that to their kid in the early years? Don't waste my time. You're wasting my time. It's taking you so long. And unaware that what we're actually doing is traumatizing our children. Literally traumatizing our children. I'm going to explain it all so we'll get the mechanics. I just want to get the feel first. So there's two things I've been trying to explain. Number one, in the secular world, we fought, I and other colleagues, for years and years and years, because they kept trying to argue with us the kid doesn't have PTSD. It's not true. They're not trauma victims. Because, as I've shown you, technically, they don't fit their models because there's no near life-threatening experience. So they start diagnosing our kids with all sorts of weird diagnoses that aren't true, that really are just reflective of their reaction of not being understood, of not being treated. So yes, they look like impulse disordered ADD, ODD. They look like emotions and feelings all over the place. Bipolar, manic depressive. And so you get these diagnoses that then come along with medications to treat something that's not true. And meanwhile, the kids are suffering something awful, and their reactions are predictable once you understand PTSD, complex PTSD. As I'm going to show you in a moment. It's mind-boggling, actually, how simple it is. I mean, it's really simple once you see it. And nevertheless, these poor kids get these diagnoses thrown at them, including very often medication for a disorder they don't have. Because what they are is complex trauma victims.